Hi, Founder fans. Jason here. Today's founder is Edward Telfair, an Articles of Confederation signer and governor of Georgia. Now, he does not have an image we know about, but what we do know is that he was born in Scotland and grew up there and decided as a young man to travel the world. And he comes to North America, bounces around for a little bit, and then ends up in Georgia. And this is just as the American Revolution is about to take off. And as such, Telfair makes a little bit of a name for himself in his new community and is elected to the provincial assembly just as that revolution starts a brewing. Now, shortly after independence is declared, Georgia selects Telfair to represent them at the Continental Congress. And Telfair stays there for the better part of 5 years. During this time, he signs the aforementioned Articles of Confederation, that first government of the United States of America. Now, after this, there's a little bit of an interesting event. In May of 1782, the hostilities are essentially over, though they are waiting for the peace treaty to be signed and ratified. And suddenly the Continental Congress realizes, among all the other money problems they have, well, we have all these commissioners overseas, our John Adamses and Ben Franklins and such, that really haven't been paid for their services. We should probably at least refund them the money they're spending out of their own pockets. That would be a really nice thing for us to do. And they decide to elect a commissioner to oversee determine how much we need to pay these people, how much this and that, just really get a vibe for the whole situation. And then they just seem to forget about it. Because about 2 months go by until Edward Telfair, out of the blue, motions in front of Congress, hey, remember we were talking about those commissioners to oversee payment of our ambassadors? Maybe we should pay the commissioner $4,000. And everyone goes, what? Really? Okay. And that gets the ball rolling. And then they finally decide to establish a committee to determine who should be the commissioner. Eventually they decide on Thomas Barclay, who himself would be a very important ambassador overseas in the future. But they talk to Thomas Barclay, but they never decide on what to pay Barclay, the commissioner, until they discover what his workload will actually be. So they said they need a commissioner. They forgot about a commissioner. Telfair comes in and says maybe we should pay the commissioner $4,000. They set up a committee who chooses a commissioner and never end up deciding how much to pay him. Not until Telfair leaves. Now that's not a lot to do with Telfair, but I thought it was a fun story I wanted to tell. What Telfair does do is he represents both Georgia and the Continental Congress. He goes south to discuss the Cherokees and Americans in the South are still fighting a war, even though the hostilities with Great Britain have ended. And he goes and attempts to resolve those hostilities with a treaty. Unfortunately, that does not work. It is too much of a task that would be pushed off to a later date. He also ends up representing Georgia in a land dispute with North Carolina. And I know we're skipping over South Carolina, but if you look at a map, North Carolina and Georgia have, North Carolina and Georgia have pretty extensive border. It's after all this work with the Continental Congress and settling border disputes and negotiating with Native Americans that he seems to be the man for the job. And Edward Telfair is elected as governor of Georgia. And he's in Georgia for the full 3 terms he's allowed to, from 1786 to 1789. During this time, he is one of the many, many Georgians who benefit from what has become known as the Yazoo land fraud. And I'm not going to get too into it now, but essentially what happened is, Georgia claimed everything all the way to the Mississippi. What we now know as Alabama and the state of Mississippi, that was all Georgia's, according to Georgia. And a big part of that was land, and they wanted to sell off land to make money for the Georgian government. Selling land in the West was all the best thing to do at that point. Now, unfortunately, there was a little bit of debate about whether or not the people selling this land actually owned this land. It would eventually turn out that they didn't, and that's why it's called a Yazoo land fraud in hindsight. Telfair is one of many people involved. He doesn't really get in trouble for it because too many people were really involved to get in trouble for it. That being said, in 1789, the first presidential election is held. George Washington dominates and is elected unanimously, except every elector got 2 votes for president, and whoever got the most of those votes would be George Washington, be president. Whoever got the second most amount would be John Adams, who received about 35 of what I believe was 69 votes at the time, about half of what Washington received. The clear winner for vice president. However, there were 12 people who also received votes. as in everyone voted for George Washington, and then half those people voted for Adams, and the other half voted for a bunch of random people. One of those people who received one vote for the first president of the United States, though technically first vice president of the United States, was Edward Telfair. He had really established that much of a reputation between not only the people of Georgia, but people across the new nation. It really speaks to his character, and it speaks to his place in society, considering Georgia was, I believe, the smallest state. They're with Rhode Island in population for smallest states. You still have Telfair down there, had made such a commotion, not a commotion, but such a name for himself, to be considered as the first president of the United States. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit like. If you're new here, subscribe. And I do want to note, I usually do my live weekly wrap-ups on Thursday. This week I will be out of town on Thursday, so I'm going to do a double-decker live wrap-up and then trivia combined mega hit on Friday. It'll be a lot of fun, so definitely come join us for that. And I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.